The small town of Windcrest lay buried under a heavy blanket of snow. The wind howled, fierce and cold, sweeping the streets in icy gusts. The roads were impassable, blocked by feet of snow, leaving the town in a frozen silence. It was the kind of night when most people stayed inside, warm and safe. Marcus, the owner of a local 24-hour diner, was just about to lock up for the night. He had worked the late shift as usual, serving tired truckers and late-night wanderers. His diner was a small but warm place with bright neon signs that made it feel like home, even in the worst of storms. The walls were lined with pictures of the town's past, and the smell of fresh coffee lingered in the air. But tonight was different. The wind outside was more brutal than usual, and the snow came down in thick, swirling sheets. Marcus had already started cleaning up, wiping down tables and putting the chairs up on the counters. He was looking forward to a quiet night at home, away from the chaos of the blizzard. Just as he was about to turn off the lights, he heard something. At first it was faint, the rumble of an engine struggling to push through the snow. But then it grew louder, much louder. Marcus furrowed his brow, stepping to the diner's door and peeking outside. Through the swirling snow, he could just make out the shape of a vehicle. It wasn't moving, but the engine revved, trying to break free from the deep snowdrifts. His heart skipped a beat when he realized it was an ambulance, stuck right across the road. The siren was silent, but the flashing lights painted the snow, red and blue in eerie patterns. Marcus hesitated for a moment. This storm was like nothing he had ever seen before. But then he saw them. The medics inside the ambulance were clearly struggling. One of them was yelling into the radio, his voice panicked, but the wind was too strong for anyone to hear. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Unit 34. We have a pregnant woman in labor. She's losing consciousness. We need immediate assistance." The medic's voice crackled through the radio, the panic in his voice unmistakable. The urgency in his voice hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He knew the town wasn't prepared for a storm like this. The snowplows hadn't been out yet, and the roads were already becoming dangerous. He turned to look at the diner, and for a moment, he considered just going back inside. After all, no one would blame him for staying warm and safe. But then he saw something that made his decision for him. The cars that passed by the ambulance didn't stop. People barely even glanced at the stranded vehicle. The few brave souls who were still on the road drove past without a second thought. It was like they were afraid to get involved, afraid to get caught in the storm's grip. No one cared. Marcus's heart pounded. He couldn't just stand there and do nothing. He didn't have time to wait for help that might not come. He grabbed his old shovel, the one he used to clear snow around the diner when it piled up. Without a second thought, he pulled on his gloves, zipped up his thick jacket, and opened the diner door. The cold hit him like a slap in the face, but he didn't hesitate. The snow was deep, the wind almost blinding, but Marcus ran toward the ambulance. The medics were still inside, shouting back and forth. Their voices were almost drowned out by the howling wind. One of them noticed Marcus and yelled, "Stay back, it's too dangerous," but Marcus didn't stop. He couldn't. His boots crunched in the snow as he reached the ambulance, pushing the shovel into the thick white blanket beneath him. He dug, hard, fast. His hands went numb from the cold, but he kept going. The shovel seemed like the only thing standing between the woman inside the ambulance and certain danger. "Please," the medic shouted. "You have to go back. We're calling for backup. We can't risk—" Marcus didn't listen. He kept digging, ignoring the medics. Desperate pleas. He could see the woman inside, her face pale, her body still as she lay in the back of the ambulance. The storm made it impossible to hear anything beyond the roar of the wind, but he could tell something was wrong. The woman wasn't moving. The baby was coming, and time was running out. The medic inside the ambulance continued to shout, but Marcus couldn't hear him. He didn't need to. He was doing what had to be done. As he shoveled frantically, his thoughts raced. The woman inside, the child that needed to be born, the lives on the line. It didn't matter that he wasn't a doctor or a paramedic. It didn't matter that he wasn't trained for this. What mattered was that he was here. He was the one who could help. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Sweat stung Marcus's eyes, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But finally, he managed to clear enough of the snow. He reached for the door of the ambulance, pulling it open. The medic was still inside, his face filled with fear and desperation. "Get her out of here," Marcus said firmly. He didn't know what else to do, but he wasn't leaving without them. The medic didn't argue. He helped Marcus pull the woman out of the ambulance. Her body was limp and she was barely breathing. Marcus didn't waste any time. He threw the woman's arm over his shoulder, supporting her weight as they walked toward the diner. The wind howled around them, snowflakes stinging their skin, but Marcus kept moving. The moment they crossed the diner's threshold, the door slammed shut behind them, and the warmth of the diner hit his freezing face. Marcus didn't even take a moment to catch his breath. He helped the medic lay the woman down on the nearest table, doing his best to steady her. With one last glance out into the storm, Marcus closed his eyes for a brief moment. The danger wasn't over. But at least for now, they were safe. And in that moment, Marcus realized something. He hadn't just saved a woman in a storm. He had saved a life. The screen faded to black. Inside the diner, the warmth was a sharp contrast to the icy storm outside. Marcus wiped his face with the back of his hand, his breath still heavy from the cold. His heart was pounding, but he knew there was no time to waste. The woman was unconscious and the medics were working fast, but panic was starting to show in their faces. The younger medic, his hands trembling as he tried to get an IV into the woman's arm, looked up at Marcus with wide eyes. I'm not sure how much longer she can last," he said, his voice shaky. "We need to get her to the hospital, but we can't move her in this storm." Marcus's mind raced. The woman's face was pale, and she wasn't responding. He knew they couldn't afford to wait. There was no hospital nearby, no doctors, no way to get her to safety unless they worked together. The older medic, a woman, with graying hair and a calm demeanor, stepped forward. Her face was etched with years of experience, but even she looked worried. "She's losing blood. We need to keep her warm and make sure the baby's okay," she said, then glanced around the diner as if searching for something. "Do you have anything? Blankets, hot water, towels, anything?" Marcus nodded quickly and went into action. He grabbed a stack of towels from the back storage closet and ran them under the hot tap in the kitchen. He knew he didn't have medical training, but this wasn't about training right now. It was about survival. He brought the towels to the woman and draped them over her body, keeping her as warm as possible. The older medic helped the young one with the IV, trying to steady his hands as they continued their work. Marcus, though exhausted, didn't stop moving. He grabbed a spare thermos from the counter and filled it with hot coffee, then offered it to the medics. They declined, too focused on their task. But just as he set the thermos down, the woman stirred slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, and she let out a weak moan. The medic closest to her leaned in. "You're okay," she whispered softly. "You're safe now. Just stay with us." Marcus watched as the woman's eyes tried to focus, her lips parting as if trying to say something. She let out a weak whisper, barely audible over the storm. "My baby," she gasped, clutching her stomach in pain. The room went still. The young medic swallowed hard, and the older medic's face turned serious. "It's time," she said quietly but firmly. "We're going to need to deliver this baby now." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know the first thing about delivering babies, but he saw the fear in their eyes, and he knew that if he didn't step up, this woman and her child might not survive the night. The older medic turned to him, her voice calm but urgent. "We need more towels. Clean ones. Get anything you can. Find. We need to prepare." Marcus nodded and rushed into the back room, pulling towels from every shelf, every closet, anything he could find. As he brought them back, he watched the medics prepare for the delivery. The woman was shaking, her breaths quick and shallow. The young medic looked terrified but tried to steady himself, focusing on the task at hand. "Is she going to be okay?" Marcus asked, his voice filled with fear he couldn't hide. The older medic gave him a look, one that spoke volumes without saying a word. It was a look that said, "I don't know." She adjusted the woman's position, speaking softly to her, encouraging her to stay calm. Marcus stepped back, feeling helpless, watching them work. The air in the diner was thick with tension, every movement feeling like a lifetime. The storm raged outside, but inside, it was just the three of them, the medics and Marcus, working to bring life into the world amidst the chaos. And then it happened. The woman gave a sharp cry, her face contorted in pain. The young medic quickly moved into position, his hands shaking but steady enough to do his job. The older medic helped him, guiding him with calm instructions. Minutes dragged by like hours. Sweat beaded on Marcus's forehead as he watched. He could hear the woman's strained breaths, the rapid beat of her heart. The storm outside seemed to match the chaos within the diner. It was hard to focus, but Marcus knew he had to stay calm. He couldn't afford to panic now. Then finally there was a sound, the sound of a baby crying. Marcus froze, his eyes wide with shock and relief. The medics looked at each other, their faces a mix of exhaustion and triumph. The baby was alive. The older medic wrapped the newborn in a towel and held the tiny, wailing child up for the mother to see. The woman, her eyes glazed with pain but filled with joy, reached out weakly to take her baby. She held the child close, her tears mixing with the sweat on her face. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had helped bring life into the world. It wasn't a hospital, it wasn't clean or sterile, but in that moment it didn't matter. They were safe. The medics worked quickly to stabilize the woman, making sure she was breathing and recovering. The younger medic stepped back, his hands still trembling, but his face lit up with a smile of disbelief. "She's going to make it," he whispered. "She's going to be okay." Marcus looked down at the baby, still crying in the medic's arms. A tiny, fragile thing that had been born in the middle of a storm, with no hospital, no doctors, no guarantee of survival. And yet, against all odds, it had made it. The woman's voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it was filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting Marcus's. "Thank you for saving us." Marcus didn't know what to say. He had never expected anything like this to happen, and he didn't know if he had done anything special. He had just done what felt right, but he simply nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. It wasn't over. There was still so much to be done, but for now, in that small diner, amid the blizzard and the chaos, a mother and her child had been given a second chance at life. The screen slowly faded to black, leaving the audience with a moment of quiet hope. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up. The snow piled higher, and the wind howled like a beast just beyond the diner walls, but inside there was a rare sense of peace. For now, the woman, now holding her newborn baby tightly to her chest, had fallen into a quiet, exhausted sleep. The medics worked to ensure she was stable, but there was nothing more they could do for now. Their job was done, but they too were weary. The young medic, his hands still shaking from the stress of the delivery, leaned against the counter, rubbing his face. His eyes were red from exhaustion. Marcus, who had been pacing the diner, stopped and took a deep breath. He had done what needed to be done, but now the reality of the situation hit him all at once. It wasn't just a blizzard outside. It was a disaster. And while he had helped save 2 lives, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more he could do. As he stared out into the storm, the door to the diner creaked open. Marcus spun around in surprise. Standing in the doorway was an older man, bundled up against the cold, his face hidden beneath a thick scarf and a knit hat. He looked worn but determined, as if he had walked for miles through the blizzard too. "Get here. Is everything okay in here?" the man asked, his voice muffled but calm. Marcus blinked. "Who are you?" The man stepped inside, brushing snow off his shoulders. He didn't look like someone from town, and Marcus couldn't remember ever seeing him before. But the man seemed strangely familiar, as if he had seen something in Marcus. That connected them. "I'm Jacob," the man said, his tone steady. "I saw the ambulance outside, and I figured you could use some help." He paused for a moment, glancing around the diner. "I'm a mechanic. I work on trucks and anything that needs fixing." Marcus didn't know what to say. He was already overwhelmed by the storm, the baby's birth, and the sudden arrival of strangers. But he didn't have time to wonder why this man had come. The more help, the better. "You saw the ambulance out there?" Marcus asked. His voice unsure. Jacob nodded. "I've been driving trucks in this town for years. If there's a way to get these roads cleared, I'll do it. It's going to take a lot more than a shovel to clear that snow." Marcus hesitated, looking down at the medics who were still busy checking on the mother. The woman was resting, her baby, nestled securely in her arms. He wasn't sure what more could be done, but then the situation hit him. There was one thing they could do. He turned back to Jacob, his eyes widening as an idea formed in his mind. "Do you think you could help us? The roads are blocked and no one can get through. We've got a woman and a newborn baby here, and we can't keep them in the diner forever." Jacob's eyes flicked toward the storm outside, his face expressionless but determined. "I can clear the path. It won't be easy, but we might be able to get her out of here, to where the snowplows can reach her. I've got a truck just down the road. It's tough, built for this kind of weather. With the right tools, I think I can make it through." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding with hope. "Do it, please. Get her and the baby to safety." Jacob didn't waste time. He walked straight toward the diner's back door, pulling on a pair of heavy gloves. He grabbed a metal shovel that Marcus had left by the door earlier and headed back outside. The wind hit him as soon as he stepped into the storm, almost knocking him off his feet. But Jacob didn't hesitate. He dug through the snow, his movements practiced and swift. Marcus watched from the window, feeling a glimmer of hope rise in his chest. If Jacob could get his truck out, it might just be their ticket to getting the woman and her baby the medical help they needed. Inside the diner, Marcus returned to his position beside the woman, still cradling her baby in her arms. He stood there, watching, waiting. The minutes seemed to drag on, each second filled with the worry that they might not get the help they so desperately needed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sound of an engine roared to life. Marcus turned just in time to see Jacob's truck push through the snowdrifts. The massive vehicle, designed for tough weather conditions, seemed to bulldoze through the storm with ease. It was moving slower than usual, but it was moving. Jacob waved at Marcus through the diner window, signaling that he had cleared a path. Marcus's heart raced. "It's time," he whispered to himself. He turned to the medics, who were now preparing. The woman for transport. She had woken up briefly, enough to look at her baby with an expression of pure love, but she was still weak, and it was clear that the storm had taken a toll on her. "We have to go now," the older medic said firmly, lifting the newborn baby into her arms. The young medic helped the mother slowly to her feet, and they moved toward the door. Marcus held it open, feeling a wave of gratitude toward Jacob. The woman, though weak, was doing everything she could to walk on her own. But she needed help. The medics assisted her as they made their way toward the truck, her baby now safely wrapped in warm towels. As they stepped into the snow, the full weight of the storm hit them, but they didn't stop. Jacob had cleared the path just wide enough for the truck to reach the diner. And now, with the woman and her child about to leave, Marcus felt a surge of relief. With a final glance back at the diner, the place that had kept them safe, Marcus knew they had done all they could. The truck's headlights cut through the swirling snow, and the engine's growl was a sound of hope. Marcus stood there for a moment longer, watching them drive off into the storm, knowing that the worst was behind them. But as the truck disappeared into the white, his heart was still heavy with the knowledge that the storm was far from over. The screen faded to black. Hours passed, but the storm raged on. The snow had thickened, and the wind howled relentlessly, making it almost impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Inside Marcus's diner, it was quiet now. Too quiet. The woman and her newborn had been safely transported, and the medics were gone, headed to the nearest hospital. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had done everything he could to help, But now he found himself pacing the diner, glancing out the window every few minutes. The roads were still blocked, the town cut off from the rest of the world. No one had come by since Jacob had cleared a path for the ambulance, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder, was there more he should be doing? The woman and her baby had made it out safely, but that wasn't the end. Marcus had a sinking feeling that there was someone else who needed help. Suddenly, the sound of a truck engine cut through the night air. Marcus's heart leapt. Was it Jacob returning to check on the progress of the road, or had someone else managed to make it through the storm? He rushed to the window, his eyes squinting against the fierce snow. The truck appeared out of the mist, a silhouette at first, but as it neared the diner, Marcus could see that it was a different vehicle entirely, a police cruiser. His stomach twisted in knots. Why was a cop out in this storm? Could something else have gone wrong? Was the woman in trouble? The truck stopped in front of the diner, the headlights casting long shadows over the snow-covered ground. The officer in the cruiser stepped out, pulling his coat tightly around him. His expression was serious, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Is everything okay here?" The officer called out, his voice muffled by the wind as he approached the diner. Marcus stepped outside to meet him, still unsure of what was happening. "Everything was fine, but I'm not sure why you're here. The roads are blocked and there's no one else in town." The officer paused, looking at Marcus carefully. "We're not supposed to be out here, but I've got a report of something strange. I had to check it out. You see, there's a guy, one of the medics, who didn't show up at the hospital. We've been trying to reach him all day, but his radio went dead. His partner thinks he's out here somewhere." Marcus frowned. "The medic, the one who was with the woman?" "Yeah," the officer replied, his tone growing more serious. "His partner said he went off to look for help after dropping off the patient, but he hasn't been heard from since. I don't know if he's in trouble, but I need to find him." The officer's words hit Marcus like a punch to the stomach. A medic had gone missing in the storm? In the blizzard's unforgiving conditions, Marcus knew it would be impossible for anyone to survive out there for long. "Do you think he's in the diner?" Marcus asked, his mind racing. He couldn't believe it. He had been so focused on getting the woman to safety that he hadn't thought about the medic's well-being. "I don't think so," the officer said, shaking his head. "We've checked all the usual routes. He could have gotten lost or worse, stuck somewhere out there in the snow." The officer's words made Marcus's chest tighten. The storm wasn't forgiving, and he knew there was no time to waste. Without even thinking, Marcus grabbed his coat, ready to head back out into the storm. "I'll help you find him," he said. "I'm not going to let anyone get left behind." The officer looked at him, surprised. "You don't have to do this. It's too dangerous out there." "I know it's dangerous," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "But he helped save that woman and her baby. It's my turn to help him." The officer's face softened. "All right, let's do this together." With a nod, they both rushed toward the truck. Marcus jumped into the passenger seat as the officer gunned the engine, pushing the cruiser forward through the snow. The headlights cut through the storm, but visibility was almost zero. The wind was so fierce it felt like they were driving through a wall of snow. Marcus could barely see a thing, but he gripped the door handle tightly, his mind racing. Where could the missing medic be? Had he gone off the main road looking for help? Or had he tried to walk back to town, thinking he could make it on foot? Minutes dragged by as they drove, Marcus's thoughts spinning. Suddenly, the officer slammed on the brakes, and the truck lurched to a stop. They were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a white expanse of snow. The truck's headlights barely illuminated the road ahead. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice low and urgent. "Do you see that?" The officer squinted, his breath fogging up the windshield. Through the dense storm, he spotted something faint, a figure standing on the side of the road. At first, Marcus thought it was just another snowdrift, but then the figure moved. It was a man stumbling through the storm, barely able to stay on his feet. "That's him," Marcus shouted, his voice filled with disbelief. The officer slammed the truck into gear, accelerating toward the figure. They pulled up next to him, and Marcus's heart sank. The medic was covered in snow, his face pale and exhausted. He looked like he hadn't seen warmth in hours, and his eyes were barely open. "Hey, buddy," the officer shouted, rushing out of the truck. "You're all right. You're safe now." The medic's lips trembled as he tried to speak. I tried. I couldn't." He mumbled, his words slurred. The officer quickly pulled him into the warmth of the truck. As they drove back to the diner, Marcus looked at the medic, feeling a deep sense of relief. The storm hadn't claimed another life. The screen slowly faded to black. The storm was relentless, but at least now the air in the truck felt warmer than it had for hours. The medic, though barely conscious, was safe in the back seat. Marcus glanced over his shoulder as the officer checked on him, making sure the medic wasn't slipping in and out of consciousness. "Hang in there," the officer muttered under his breath, his eyes on the road. "We'll get you back to the diner. You're going to be okay." Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. The officer had already done so much to help, and now they were both risking their lives in the blizzard for someone else. It made him reflect on how strange the night had been. What started as an ordinary evening, closing up his diner after another long shift, had turned into a life-or-death struggle for strangers who had become so much more than that. The officer's truck groaned as it fought against the snow. It had been a tough journey back, but finally they spotted the warm glow of the diner in the distance. It was like a beacon in the storm, the one place that had withstood the worst the blizzard had to offer. Marcus could feel the tension in his body start to release as they neared the building, but there was still a sense of urgency in the air. The medic had to be checked over, and the storm wasn't about to give up anytime soon. When they reached the diner, Marcus jumped out and hurried to help the officer carry the medic inside. The storm was fierce now, but the diner was a sanctuary of warmth. They brought the medic in and set him down at the booth where the woman had sat earlier. The diner had become a place of survival, and Marcus had never been more grateful for the little business he had built. Inside, the lights flickered slightly, casting a soft glow across the tables. The scent of coffee and freshly baked pies still lingered in the air, making the space feel just as it always had, despite the chaos of the storm outside. The officer worked quickly, trying to warm the medic up as best as he could. "We need to get you to a hospital," the officer muttered. "But right now, you just need to stay awake." The medic, barely able to keep his eyes open, nodded weakly. "Thanks for everything. I thought I was done for out there." Marcus stood in the background watching the scene unfold. He couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility that clung to him. He had helped save the woman and her child, helped get the medic out of the storm, but he kept wondering if there was more he could do. It wasn't just about survival. It was about paying it forward. He didn't know why he felt so strongly, but there was something in him that said he needed to do more. As the officer worked on the medic, Marcus stepped out from the back of the diner and grabbed a warm blanket from the shelf. He draped it over the medic's shoulders, feeling the weight of the moment. It was a simple gesture, but to the medic it might as well have been a lifeline. "You're gonna be fine," Marcus said softly, looking down at the medic. "We'll get you back to your team soon. But for now, just rest." The medic's eyes fluttered open for a moment, and he gave Marcus a tired smile. "Thank you, you didn't have to help, but you did. I'll never forget that." Marcus nodded, feeling an overwhelming sense of pride that he couldn't explain. He didn't do what he did for gratitude or recognition, but it felt good to know that his actions had made a difference. It was the same reason he ran his diner, 24/7, always offering a warm meal to anyone in need. No one was ever turned away, not if he could help it. The officer moved around the diner, checking the window, making sure the snow wasn't creeping inside, keeping an eye on the weather. He had done his part, but the truth was they were still stranded. No one was getting out of here anytime soon. "We've got to wait for this storm to pass," the officer said, his voice tense. "But we've done all we can. The roads won't be cleared for hours, maybe even longer." Marcus nodded, his eyes moving to the window, where the snow still raged outside. The thought of waiting for the storm to let up was nerve-wracking. People in the town would need help, but who would get to them if the roads stayed blocked? He had no answers, but for now he focused on the immediate needs of those in his care. The medic stirred, groaning slightly as the warmth of the diner's interior slowly revived him. He looked up at Marcus. "I should have called for backup earlier, but I didn't want to leave her." Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did what you could, and you're here now. That's what matters." The medic's face softened, with relief. "Thank you. You didn't just save us, you saved my whole team." A silence fell over the diner as they all took in what had happened, how a random series of events had led them here, to this strange place of warmth in the middle of an unforgiving storm. Marcus had never expected to play such a crucial role in this life-or-death situation, but it didn't matter. He had done what he had to do, and that was enough. As the storm continued its howl outside, the warmth inside the diner grew. There was no more rushing or frantic energy. Everyone in that diner knew that, for now, they were safe. The road ahead might still be uncertain, but for the first time in hours they had found a place where they could breathe. Marcus stepped back from the booth and gazed out the window once more. The wind howled outside, but inside everything was calm. For now. The night was long, but the storm slowly began to lose its fury as dawn approached. The wind had eased, and the snow fell more gently now, covering the world in a blanket of white. Inside the diner, the warmth was comforting, the soft hum of the heating system filling the quiet moments. Marcus sat at one of the booths, sipping his coffee, his mind still processing everything that had happened. He glanced over at the medic, who was now fully awake, sitting at the counter with the officer, talking quietly. The storm outside had torn through the town, but inside the diner, everything felt safe, calm. The officer, who had been checking the roads for any signs of progress, walked over to Marcus with a look of relief. "Looks like the worst is over. The plows should be out soon. The roads will be passable within the next few hours." Marcus nodded, relieved that the danger had passed, but a part of him still couldn't shake the feeling that the storm wasn't just about snow. It had felt like a test of what people were willing to do for each other when everything else was stripped away. In that diner, surrounded by strangers, Marcus had found a purpose he hadn't expected. "Good news," Marcus said with a tired smile. "I'm glad to hear it." As the officer went to grab his gear, the medic approached Marcus, still looking a bit worse for wear but with a newfound gratitude in his eyes. "I owe you," he said quietly, his voice full of emotion. "You saved my life, man. More than that, you saved all of us." Marcus shook his head, not wanting any thanks, but the medic's sincerity was undeniable. "I just did what anyone would have done," Marcus replied, his voice calm but carrying a weight of truth. "We all help each other out here. That's how it works." The medic, still struggling to find the right words, finally just nodded. "You're right, and if you ever need anything at all, just let me know. I won't forget what you did." The officer came back over, a serious expression on his face. "I've got to go make sure the roads are cleared and get back to the station, but I'll make sure the word gets out about what happened here tonight." "You did good, Marcus?" Marcus simply nodded, his mind still swirling with the events of the night. As the officer and medic walked out into the now muted morning, the diner fell into an almost peaceful silence. Marcus took one last glance out. The window at the fresh snow, now soft and untouched. It was hard to believe the chaos that had just unfolded in the hours before. He turned to go back into the diner, preparing to clean up, but before he could take a step, he noticed something. A figure standing outside the diner, in the snow. His heart skipped a beat. It was the woman, the one he had helped earlier. She was standing in the snow, holding a small bundle in her arms. Her face was soft with a quiet smile, and though the wind whipped at her clothes, she was steady on her feet. As Marcus stepped outside, she didn't say a word at first. She simply walked toward him, her eyes meeting his with a sense of calm. "Gratitude, Marcus," she said softly, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I came back to thank you." Marcus looked at her, confused for a moment. I didn't expect to see you again. Is everything okay with the baby?" She smiled, her eyes sparkling with emotion. Yes, my baby is doing fine. But it's not just about the baby. It's about what you did for me. What you did for all of us. She stepped closer, carefully handing him the bundle in her arms. Marcus blinked, surprised, and gently took the small bundle from her. Inside was a tiny gift, a gold necklace, simple but elegant, with an engraving. The woman's voice was soft but filled with sincerity. This is for you. It's not much, but it's something to remind you that what you did mattered. You didn't have to, but you did. Marcus looked down at the necklace, his heart swelling with emotion. He never expected this, never expected anyone to give him anything in return. But the thought of her trust, the weight of the moment, was enough to leave him speechless. I don't know what to say, Marcus whispered, his voice thick with gratitude. You don't have to say anything, she said, stepping back and glancing at the snow-covered world around them. You showed us that even in the darkest times there's always light. We've all been through a lot. But tonight you showed us that we're never truly alone. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't just a diner owner anymore. He was a part of something bigger than himself. He had become the thread that connected these strangers in their time of need. And in that simple act of helping them, he had discovered a deeper sense of purpose that he had never known before. I'll never forget this, Marcus said quietly. The woman smiled one last time, before turning to walk back into the storm. The bundle of warmth in his hands seemed to glow against the cold, a symbol of everything that had happened, everything that had been shared. As Marcus watched her disappear into the snow, he turned back toward the diner. The storm had passed. A new day was breaking, soft light filtering through the windows. Inside, the diner felt like a different place now. Not just a diner, but a refuge, a place where lives were changed. Marcus stood at the door for a moment, his hand on the handle, before stepping inside. The door closed behind him, and the bell rang gently, as if to announce a new beginning. The screen faded to black,